There's a story that's going viral right now from a Jennifer Lawrence interview in which she says that she was almost Sharon Tate from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but then Quentin Tarantino in the studios got bullied out of it because the internet said that she was too ugly to play Sharon Tate or not pretty enough to play Sharon Tate.
And I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, too. Didn't he want you?
Well, he did, and then everybody was like, she's not pretty enough to play Sharon Tate. And then they didn't.
And this story, especially how much it's gone viral, is driving me crazy. Because I'm currently reading this 500-page book about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which details everything from the writing of it, the production design, the filming, and yes, the casting. And there is no mention in it of Jennifer Lawrence being considered, and more importantly, it was always Margot Robbie. Jennifer Lawrence's story kind of relies on a lot of different aspects. First is the idea that she was in the running for the role of Sharon Tate, which I'm going to prove is wrong. Then it's the idea that she was in the running, or even maybe a favorite. The story leaked, the internet bullied her into saying that she wasn't pretty enough, and then that the studio and Tarantino himself would have given into that pressure and made a massive casting decision based on that. And that doesn't sit right with me either. Now, Tarantino is in a lot of heat these days, and I'm not going to go into that at all in this video. But the one thing I don't think we can accuse him of is being someone that lacks much of a backbone when it comes to implementing his vision. So that was one of the things that didn't sit right with me even before digging into the facts, is the idea that he would have picked Jennifer Lawrence and that it's online trolls that would have made him and the studio change their mind. But it turns out she was never considered for Sharon Tate. Once he had set his mind to including the Manson murders within his story, for him, there had only been one person to play the 60s starlet, Margot Robbie. And then some words from Quentin Tarantino. As soon as I started in on the screenplay, I knew that only Margot could play Sharon. By the way, I'm reading this in preparation for a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood deep dive podcast episode, so make sure to follow for that later this year. If Margot couldn't do it, then I would have been shit out of luck. I had no number two. So no number two, no backup, no shortlist. Tarantino had his eye set on Margot Robbie. And actually, the really cool part of the story is that around that time, Margot Robbie actually sent him a letter. I had seen a cut of I, Tonya, a first real cut, and I remember distinctly thinking, I'm finally good enough at acting that I can reach out to my idols, Robbie reveals. The dream is to be in a Quentin Tarantino film. And so I finally worked up the nerve. I'm telling myself, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I sat down and I wrote a letter to Quentin. I couldn't believe it, Quentin exclaims. It was so romantic the way she wrote. She outlined how she and her family in Australia had been fans of my film since forever. And if there was anything I wanted her to do on one of my films, just to let her know. It was perfect, and just what I wanted to hear. She was like one of the hottest actors in town, and I'd been thinking only of her to play Sharon, and then I received the letter. A couple of weeks passed, and Margot received the message she had been dreaming of. Quentin wanted to talk to her. After discussing the script, Margot said, Quentin, I thought it was wonderful, and I would love to read for the role. Read? Fuck that. It is yours. I'm offering it to you. Do you want it? Yes. So it was a true meeting of the minds. He wanted her and she wanted to be in his movie. So in this world, I see no scenario in which anyone else was seriously considered. But then there's another wrinkle to this story. Jennifer Lawrence was considered for a role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. There are credible news stories that she was invited to Tarantino's house, much like Leo, much like Brad Pitt, much like Margot Robbie, but not to read for Sharon Tate, but for the role of Squeaky, one of the Manson girls, a role that eventually went to Dakota Fanning. So Jennifer Lawrence was involved, but just never for the role of Sharon Tate, which kind of makes the whole story even weirder, that she would misremember the fact that she was in the running for a different role. And then it comes to the whole pretty comment. Again, I've told you that I didn't believe the idea that someone like Tarantino would change it if he had her in mind, which we've proven that he didn't. But where does this idea that she was bullied come from? The only thing I could find that links back to this pretty comment is there was a relative of Sharon Tate who had no association with the production. She was asked about Margot Robbie versus Jennifer Lawrence playing the role of Sharon Tate. And she said it should be Margot Robbie because she's prettier and looks more like Sharon Tate. But this isn't online trolling. This isn't someone that had anything to do with the production. This is simply a random person giving their opinion. So the idea that this has snowballed into the idea that Jennifer Lawrence almost had the role of Sharon Tate is just a complete fallacy. The funny thing is, what it reminds me the most of is the section in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when Timothy Olyphant's character asks Rick Dalton if he was almost cast in The Great Escape. And Rick Dalton explains that basically there was a moment in time where maybe Steve McQueen wasn't going to do it, and there was a list, and there were 3 people, and he was at the bottom of that list. So no, he was never seriously considered to be in it, but there was a very tangential link between him and the movie. And that's kind of what's happened here. Jennifer Lawrence seemingly met with Tarantino about playing another role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's possible that someone in the press then reported Jennifer Lawrence being considered for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood movie about Sharon Tate, and then they asked someone who was related to Sharon Tate if she thought that was a good idea, and she then made a comment about Jennifer Lawrence maybe not being as pretty as Margot Robbie, and then somehow 6 years later that's turned into this headline: Jennifer Lawrence not cast as Sharon Tate because she wasn't pretty enough. It's all a bit silly, but I just wanted to give you the facts. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. Every month I put out one long-form episode where I sit down with a guest to discuss one of our favorite movies, and then we put out loads of bonus content like this.